Hi, Miguel. Good morning. Welcome to the Soliverse podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Before we start, I wanted to frame you and the company. Miguel is the co-founder and CTO of nTeaser, a platform transforming renewable energy transactions with a background in business, entrepreneurship, and innovation. He has worked both in energy and tech before launching nTeaser. Now he's focused on making renewable project acquisitions faster, more transparent, and more efficient through digitalization. Under his leadership, nTeaser has become a key player in the industry, hosting more than 200 projects and kilowatt plus across solar, wind, BESS, biogas, and most importantly, green hydrogen as well. If you want to ask somebody about renewables and investment trends without jargon, Miguel is the person to talk to. Miguel, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Peter. That's a very good summary. Just to highlight certain things you said as we're very innovative in many ways, but also very archaic company in other ways. It always feels like the renewable energy space, although it's very in the news every day and it's the hot topic of everyday news. It's at the same time very backwards in many of the ways it operates. It's very archaic, and especially in regards to M&A. This is, as you probably know, the traditional M&A process that we currently have has been inherited from England from the 19th century, and it has been changed very little since then. If you ask someone to sell you something, they ask everyone they know if they want to buy it, and if one of their friends or people or contacts says they're willing to acquire the project or the company, put them in contact, and you charge them a fee to intermediate, to be the middleman between buyers and sellers. And we said, and what has recently occurred in many other sectors is you have a demand side, you have a supply side. Contacts are very limited because the people you know have a limited capability. And what has happened in many other industries is let's open that. Let's centralize demand, let's centralize supply, and let's make a more perfect market in which every buyer knows everything there is to sell, every seller knows everyone who wants to buy them. And it happened in a lot of different spaces. It's happened in real estate across Europe and the United States. And we're bringing that innovation into renewables and really centralizing the supply, centralizing the demand, and making the market more liquid in many ways, making it easier to invest and disinvest or uninvest from the assets that the companies have. So that's basically nTeaser in a nutshell and in a more philosophical way explained.
Wow, thank you. I could not have asked for a better intro. So basically, we can also think about you as a liquidity provider, right?
Exactly. What we want to make is, instead of having many companies in the space, this is a very interesting space because although it's a B2B market in which companies operate, it's very atomized. So there's a lot of different players, a lot of big players, a lot of small players, a lot of medium-sized players. And what happened is, or what we've been traditionally used to, is aggregation. So companies buy a lot of assets or build a lot of assets or develop a lot of assets and then sell them together. And this eventually means that when a company such as Eni or Engie or EDF or EDP buys a portfolio, they have a lot of good projects, they buy a lot of average projects, and they buy a lot of bad projects. And it also forces developers and the companies that build these projects to have to sell everything because that's their role once they have everything ready to be sold, and then depend on that money they make to invest during 5, 6, 7 years for a chance to be able to make money again in 5, 6, 7 years. What we've done is, you don't need to sell everything. Let's sell one project. Let's make money now. And then with that project, you can keep building what you have been building. You don't have to sell the house half built to buy a new one to build. You can just sell one room of the house and then use the money to keep building the rest of the house. And that's basically what we've been trying to create, and what we are creating across Spain, but also Italy, and of course different technologies.
Wow, when you put it that way, it really connects all the dots for me as well. It's a full circle of the life cycle of the project. So essentially, you are almost like a venture capitalist, right? That boosts all the transactions and also the life cycles of those projects.
In many ways, this is the first time I heard it as being called a venture capital. But in many ways, we're very much called like the Tinder of renewables, because we connect people, we make people match. We make sellers match with buyers. So we do work in that way, but the idea is, hey, let's sell what you think is right now. Don't wait for the future, and let's make a business model that the fees are so low and the cost of being able to sell asset is so ridiculous compared to what it was originally, that you can disinvest with very small assets that originally the fixed cost would not make sense to sell small things. So we change that dynamic, and we reduce the fixed cost so much that selling individual assets makes sense.
Wow. I mean, if I'm only thinking about my experience, I'm doing quite a lot of advisory on different types of startups, and basically just the due diligence, right, of that asset startup. In this case, it's quite astronomical. And when we are looking at your platform, and how much you actually lower those barriers and costs, it's really decreases all the investments required, right?
Yes, the art of being a good artist is making difficult things simple. It's very easy to make very complicated things, which sounds counterintuitive, but in many ways, adding extra parts and making and adding steps to a process, that's very easy. What good engineers, with good artists, with what people who are very specialized in optimizing things, their hardest challenge is, okay, let's make things simple. And making things simple is super complicated. So that's very much what we think is, let's make things as simple. What is cut all the things that are nice to have and center ourselves around the things that we need. And let's focus on the things that are really necessary. And let's take away things that maybe were necessary 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago. With nTeaser, we don't want to disrespect anyone who came before us and did great things, because there were different times. But as the times change and as our capabilities with the internet, with digitalization, have broadened the capability to reach countries where our grandfathers couldn't even locate in a map, then let's use that to become more efficient. And that's very much the grand vision of the company.
Indeed, it makes perfect sense on so many levels, and it actually really resonates with me as well. You mentioned a word that triggered me a little bit here, digitization. COVID actually served as a big catalyst for this, especially here in Europe, right? We've seen many companies going from paper to actually finally using some sort of software to run the business. What role did you guys play in that? What was the kind of previous workflow in the companies that you are currently working with?
Okay, so I think it's very good for the listeners to understand a bit about many people. My dad always jokes about this a lot, and he says many people never sell a company in their lives, and usually people who are very successful sell one. So no one has real experience in selling anything big. If you ask people who has sold a soda before or a burger, there's a lot of people who worked at restaurants and can tell you how to do it. But if you ask people, hey, how do you sell a 50 megawatt PV project, then there's very few people who have experience in that, right? But usually how these things operate is one company opens an M&A process, and they prepare all the documents that are necessary for an investor to evaluate. And usually this includes information about the market, because of course, if you're going to buy something, you want to understand the broader political, economic, regulatory landscape in which they operate. In many ways, in renewables, social, it has become a very big part, because there's a lot of push in different areas from local groups that are pushing against some places against wind, or some places against storage, or against nuclear power. So in many ways, that is a big context. And then you have to have a context about the assets. Now, the good thing about our world is that the things we're selling are not companies. They're just assets. They're just hundreds of panels in somewhere in Spain or somewhere in Italy. There's no people involved, which means you don't have to deal with breakups or divorces or people getting fired or other things. You just have to sell an asset that is going to sell energy or produce energy for the next 25 years if you're lucky, less efficiently every time, because of course we know panels degrade and things go up, but with expected for around 2,000 hours a year, 1,800. I know in the Northern Europe you have less yield in your projects, but it depends a bit country by country, right? and they add all this information, they aggregate it, and they sell it, and they basically end up sending LinkedIn messages or emails to everyone they know who they think can buy the project, anyone they think that knows someone who can buy the project. And at the end, it becomes very inefficient, very archaic in many ways, and very random. The chances that you're going to find the correct buyer by just making a list and start sending messages is very, very unlikely. But that's the way it is, and that's the way it worked. And 30, 40 years ago, when there was no internet, that was probably the best way to do it. So I'm not criticizing now. Times have changed, and everyone isn't. Not everyone, but a lot of the people, especially the people who want to buy assets, are on the internet, and they're looking in the internet to buy these assets. And what we've done is, hey, if we centralize all this information, if we get rid of everything that's not necessary, because for a buyer who is going to buy a project in Spain and they want to buy it, they're probably going to see 50 analysis about the Spanish market from the 50 different projects. They're all going to be exactly the same. So let's just make a unified info of what the market is like, and then let's just put this specific information of the project that's necessary for initial both financial and strategic analysis of the asset. Because it's not only important that it's going to make you money, but how are you going to run it? How is it going to play together with all the orchestra of projects that you have on your portfolio? How is that all going to work? Once that works, then you start a negotiation process, which is very long and very tedious. There's a lot of players involved. We are trying to unify that, and we're going to try to make it simpler. Funny anecdote that we always tell here is all these projects are aggregated in something called a data room. This originally used to be a room where there was a lot of papers, and people would go there and read the papers and see if everything was okay. Now all of that is done virtually, so you just access very much a Drive or a Dropbox. It's more refined than that, but in many ways it works the same way, where all the information is aggregated. But originally this was a room, and in many ways the same way that people right now with their data room look at that room full of documents, the same way we look at the process that is done in a very archaic way, and that we think by centralizing supply and centralizing demand, it could be a win-win for all sides. It could be a win for the buyers because they know everything that is on the market. It's a win for the sellers because they can reach everyone who's buying the projects on the market. And it's a very big win for the advisors, for the people, for the lawyers, for the financial advisors that help with getting financing, closing PPAs, which are you don't sell the project, but you sell the energy that they produce. For all the technical advisors that make sure everything technically works perfect. All of them, if they have everything centralized in one point, it just makes life easier for everyone. So it's a win-win-win. The only ones that lose is inefficiency.
So they actually, all the advisors and all the service providers know where to fish, right? So they don't have to do their own research. They just come to your platform and they are good to go.
Yes, exactly. We work with a lot of different advisors, financial advisors that help with making financial models, securing financing, closing PPAs. A lot of things are crucial for the deal to close. They help with that, and they're already centralized to the platform. Lawyers that help with all the legal matters, and these are very complex legal documents, especially with regulation changing all the time. The Italian market is very much chaos, and everyone who's in Italy can tell you that because regulation is very local, so it gets changed all the time. And you do have something, and they ask you, "Hey, I need this paper in 6 months." And when you go and hand in that paper, they tell you, "Hey, I don't need this paper anymore. I need the other one." It's very much like one of Hercules's jobs that he had to do, where just dealing with a lot of bureaucracy that exists. And then there's the technical advisors that help technically to make sure that the project is feasible and the project is what is painted to be. And that has to do with studies of the yield, studies of where the project is built, studies of making sure that there's no technical restrictions or things that are going to make the project impossible or very difficult.
Wow. Okay. But maybe we actually jumped in the middle already. Maybe if you could circle back a little bit and maybe let's take a look at where you guys started. So what has inspired you? What has inspired the creation of nTeaser? What was the inspiration behind that?
Perfect. So we'll do, I think the best way to tell you this is by telling you a story, right? Of how it was built, how it could have been built. There's always a bit of story and a bit of myth, these tales. The founder of the company her name is Carmen. She is an engineer by trade. So an engineer focused in renewable energies. And after leaving industry, she turned to the dark side and started working in finance like a lot of engineers and ended up working. So Carmen started working at one of the big four typical consultancies, doing M&A, doing exactly what we're trying to do at nTeaser. And Carmen's, as a good engineer, saw inefficiencies. And what do engineers do when they find inefficiencies? They write them down and they start creating a list of, hey, we could it's better, we could automate this, we could digitalize this, we could make this more efficient. At the same time, one of the biggest entrepreneurial success of Spain's history, which is Idealista, they are a company that was sold by over $2 billion US. They started centralizing supply and demand of real estate, so of flats and houses. And what they started is getting in contact possible buyers of houses with possible seller societies. In that moment, Carmen realized that revolution that had occurred in housing and that had made this company so successful was eventually going to happen in the renewable energy space. Not only was it eventually going to happen, it just made more sense to happen in the renewable space. And why did it make more sense to happen in the renewable space? Because different to houses, the buyers of renewable assets, the big utilities, the big infrastructure funds, they buy in a very recurrent basis. So it's not like a house where you buy once in a lifetime or twice in a lifetime and you end up forgetting. With this, it was a constant, companies were on the market on a constant basis. So the relationship was much more long-term. This made it so much easier, so much more difficult for this platform to be jumped. Because of course, if you're only going to buy one, it makes sense to glitch the system, to cheat. But if you're going to if this relationship is going to be long-term, then the things change. It's very much like the prisoner's dilemma. It changes a lot if it's just a once-off or if it happens every day. If it happens every day, your answer is very different. Because the person you betrayed last time, you're not going to have to, you're going to have to work with them the next day. And that changes everything. So that's what Carmen viewed. So she had the idea, and it is very much what happens when you're an entrepreneur is that it's not that you find a problem and find a solution. Is that you become obsessed with the problem. Is that you can't sleep at night. The first thing you wake up in the morning is the problem, and the last thing you go to sleep in the night is the problem. And the problem is every day, and you just keep making it better, making it better. At that point,
and you only find the solution after
Christmas,
working hours.
Sorry, Peter?
And you only find the solution after working hours when you're not actually working, when you're not supposed to be working, right?
When you're not supposed to be working, yes, because you always work too much. The best ideas always happen in the shower.
Yeah.
So Carmen, and one Christmas, as engineers too, she programmed the whole platform as she envisioned it in her head because she was very bored. She would do is spend the day with her family, and then when everybody went to bed, she would turn her laptop on, put her earphones on, start programming the whole platform. So at the end, when Carmen and I had a dinner on February 2023, she presented me a beautiful platform she had programmed, which she was obsessed with and which was the love of her life. And not only was the platform the love of her life, the idea was the love of her life, telling me she had already over 100 companies that had contacted her and wanted to be clients. And she had one project, which she was going to sell, which one seller had come to her and said, hey, I want you to sell me this project. The problem with this project is she wanted to sell it as she was used to traditionally, just I'm going to contact emails, I'm going to get in touch, I'm going to get them work. And at that moment, we realized if we wanted to make the idea work, we had to use the platform to sell the project. We were actually not only we realized, but we were a bit we were a bit forced to do it because one of our current advisors told us, hey, you're gonna come here in 3 weeks, and you're gonna have that project, and you're gonna have offers. There's no way around it. So at that point, we started building the company, and it was very exponential. We hired our first employee in December. There's 13 of us right now. We're still hiring more people. We're profitable. We make money every month. It has become a very, very successful business, and it just sparked with an idea and especially with an obsession. And it's really, that's where it roots in. I'm not encouraging obsessions. Obsessions are not good, no. And you shouldn't. It's probably not the best thing, but having obsessions at some point, the same way you have a child and the first few years, the only thing you can think is your child, or you have this hobby and you can't stop thinking. It's very important that if you want to be successful with entrepreneurship and with your project, that you become obsessed, because it's so hard that if you're not obsessed, you're not going to be able to make it.
Yeah, but you guys actually put something like a ChatGPT speeded up version of a typical startup journey, right? You build the MVP, which has been validated automatically, and then actually you technically sign the first deal. So that's really the exception than the rule, right?
Exactly. It's very different. But Carmen always jokes about that when you go to startup schools or business schools, the first book they give you is the book called Lean Startup, which basically the thesis is build an MVP, build the basic project that you can do, and try to sell it and see if someone buys it. And Carmen said, I was so lean, I started the book and left it halfway because that's how efficient I am. So it's very much so that you have to start with the simplest thing. We started with no code. So Carmen coded everything on low code, no code basis using Bubble. So no real JavaScript or Python or HTML, just super simple, not drag and drop, but very, very close to it, and building the most basic thing. And when we went out there and started telling investors, first clients, they started freaking out because they thought our no code was the most innovative thing they have ever heard of. This was before ChatGPT, to be honest. And the second thing was, and also quite funny about it, is when we started thinking about who to hire, when we started building, we thought about hiring a no-code programmer and just keeping the no-code. But at the end, it just makes sense to go into real code because it is faster, it is more efficient, and it allows you more flexibility. And that's important as you go and you build. And right now we have over 400 companies as clients. So we need something that offers a good solution. But originally, it was no code, drag and drops. I would tell Carmen, I want this color change. She would go in, touch a button, the color would change. And that's very much what you need to sell. And then if it works, then you change.
Yeah. And I mean, that actually brings me back to a lesson I learned in my career as well. So I'm a sales guy, so I'm not exactly the technical person, right? And then sometimes you get stuck in this loop of building stuff for the sake of building instead of solving the real problem. And you guys really turned this upside down and you approached it from the right direction.
Yeah. And also many times you become very professional. Like you want to have everything perfect. And something very important is being good. One motto that we keep saying is the good is the enemy of the perfect. Because if you focus on being perfect, you become so inefficient and you start working so that you don't get there. Or you slow down. It's much more important to just be good enough. And if you're good enough, and if it's 90% there, of course, there's certain things in life that you have to be 99, 100% right. But there's many things in life that you're spending way too much time to make it perfect, and just make it good and sell it. You're probably, everyone who knows what startups should watch Silicon Valley and in HBO, the series. Yeah. It's a wonderful series. It's extremely funny and it's very real because everything that's happened there has happened to us a couple of times already. And one thing they highlight when they talk a lot about building a startup and being perfectionist and highlighting is that idea of, hey, it's more important to get to be in market and to be able to sell than it is to build a perfect product. I remember this episode once where they say, hey, I got you the best sales guys in the world. Now bring them the product so they can sell. And they say, okay, we're going to make this mediocre product. And they say, no, you have to give them the best product in the world and they say, but if they're the best sales guys in the world, why can't they sell a mediocre product? Why do they need the best product? You say, no, you have to give them something easy to sell so they don't go to a different company because they want to do something easy. But in many ways, if you want to be a good salesperson, you got to sell something that is good. And it doesn't have to be great. Of course, you have to offer value, but at the same time, you also have to be able to know when it's good enough and when you're not overspending time in improving a product. If it's good to go to market, just throw it to market. And if you launch in something and it's perfect, you launch it too late. Like you wasted too much time. Launch it and see how the world reflects. Throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks.
I can only echo that. I've seen that many, many times. And usually I'm the sales guy, and then the job of the sales guy is to balance the promises with reality, right? So you always want to kind of under-promise and over-deliver. But in some companies, it comes out the other way around. So it's quite a tricky situation. But I agree with you on the startup side of things for sure.
Yes, and have in mind that things are going to improve, and you have to know that. But also, you can't live in your dreams. Like, for example, many things we were selling originally, I would be ashamed to sell it right now because the company has grown and become much more professional, and the service is 100 times better than when it was just two of us. Obviously, there was just two of us doing everything. But at the same time, hey, at the time it had a market and the market changes and you have to adapt with it. And the standards were lower back then, and now the standards are higher because we are a more professional company and we adapt with the times, and that's good. But also, I think fear is one of the things that stops people from entrepreneurship. It depends on the countries. I think in Europe, in general, Spain in specifically, we're very afraid of failing, and that's a constant fear. I think I lived a lot of years in the United States, and the idea is totally different. Like failure is very much even admired there. That hey, you tried, which is a big part. But here we're very scared, and we have to maybe change a bit of that mentality, saying, hey, of course you're taking a risk, it's gone wrong, but it's better taking that risk than living your whole life thinking, what if I had done it? And that's something we try to teach everyone and try to make it part of the corporate culture is, hey, you innovate, it sometimes goes wrong. Hey, doesn't matter. We go back to the old way and see how we can change it again.
Yeah, I mean, and this is, I think, a European illness as well, right? We like to regulate first and then do afterwards when we have regulated the non-existing thing as well. So I can only echo that we should be doing more doing and less thinking, right? In this sense.
Yes, this implementation is the key. Yeah, I completely agree. I was in breakfast actually a year and a half ago. With who is now the president of energy in Europe, Teresa Rivera. She's Spanish, and she didn't have that role back then. And I was hearing her talking about regulation of hydrogen, and there was no hydrogen implemented nationwide. There was no projects, and they were already talking about regulating hydrogen, which was very amusing because in many ways we try to be too ahead of things, and that's not a critique to her or to what the European government or her is doing, but more to us because we regulate our life on a constant basis and are too afraid to try things. And we start thinking of what would happen if I did that, then this is going to happen, this is going to happen. And you're already talking about the man living in Mars outcome. And you haven't even built a rocket.
Yeah. We are jumping to the worst possible outcome, and then it slows us down significantly. Exactly. Compared to the US or China, like the best example now is this whole AI race, right? We are not even on the map, and the US and China are, light years ahead, right?
Well, French are doing okay. Not much AI in Spain being implemented. In many ways, though, that's also reality because in many ways, for example, nTeaser, bring it back to our own terrain and bring it back, or AI, we could keep it AI. There's a lot of innovation that we haven't even come to the 20th century in many ways, and we're already thinking about the 22nd it's in many ways there's so many simpler things that could be done that bring us much closer to our point. I have clients that I have to teach them how to use an Excel and send a Gmail, which sounds incredible. At that point, I don't even need to talk about AI or DeepSeek or ChatGPT or the rest. 3 steps behind. So in many ways, we become, there's a certain tendency, and I think this happens a lot, and it happens a lot when you're an entrepreneur, and that's something you have to fight against, is that you become so englobed in your own ecosphere and so involved in what you think that you make that the norm. And you start saying things such as everybody knows, and we all know, and those are not very much the case, because when you talk to different people, you realize that people have different opinions, and they share different opinions, and everybody has their own why. Even you don't have to go very far. Even if you ask your neighbor, they probably see the world a different way, and things that are totally obvious to you are non-existent. They never heard about that thing in their life. So in many ways, you have to try working and try mixing. I always tell the people here, people always use Warren Buffett as a great success story, right? He built Berkshire Hathaway, and it was a wonderful company, and he was super successful. And you say, and I think what was special? And something that I found very interesting is every day he goes to McDonald's and he orders his Whopper and his drink for lunch, which is not very healthy indeed. But in many ways, that helps him stay in the world. And that is very different to a lot of billionaires that live at the very different life. He's very much, he drives the same car, he lives in the same house that he lived when he was just a middle class American. And now he's a billionaire and he still lives in the same house, drives the same car, eats at McDonald's. And that helps you see what the world sees. And that helps him invest in Coca-Cola or in McDonald's when people were investing in a lot of Google, a lot of internet companies that went past in the internet when the internet bubble burst. So I think that's very impressive, and that's an example that we all have to take into account.
It makes perfect sense. It reminds me of my first sales job. I had a really good trainer, and he actually told me, and this is a really good lesson I repeat to myself every day. When you're in a sales job, your job is actually not to talk, but to listen. So that's why you have the ratio of 2 ears and 1 mouth. So use it that way. And
exactly,
it really
you're
serves
there
well.
to, in very ways, for me, is that it depends on the sales jobs, but in many ways, unless you're selling Coca-Colas or Whoppers, the things that we sell are very complicated and have a lot of things. And in many ways, although you have a very wide value proposition, you start listening, we do this and we do that and we do this third thing and this fourth thing and this fifth thing. There's really one thing or two things that really matter to this specific client. And they're waiting for you to tell them that. But you have to listen to what they're looking for and say, hey, this is of my solution what aligns with you. And that's very, very hard to do because we want to tell them everything. And what we think is the best thing in our product, the client might not care. So you have to step back and say, hey, what do you want? And then say, hey, I can offer you that. Or sometimes it's even better to be honest and say, hey, I can't do that, but I'll put you in contact with someone who can. And in that way, you don't waste your time pursuing a client that is not going to buy it from you. They don't waste their time trying to find out the way that your key fits into their lock when there's not going to be a match, and that's okay.
Exactly. And since we are talking about the product, let's maybe circle back to the technological side of things. So
wonderful.
What new features are you guys preparing right now? What are you excited about?
What am I excited about? Wonderful. So I'll tell you about what I was excited about 2 months, because it's very easy to think, hey, what is the next thing? And what is the next thing? And what is the next thing? I'll tell you about what we're building right now, but I want to circle back to 2 months ago and the things we were building. 2 months ago, we launched in Italy. That was a big step forward, especially because with renewable energies, and this is a big problem when you have good European companies that try to move to the US or good US companies that try to come to Europe. That's something that stifles them, is that they operate in the US as if it was Europe, or they operate in Europe as if it was the US. So in Europe, every country is very different. Every country has their own regulation. And it's usually, we have a lot of regulation. So when you try to open Europe-wide, for example, when a US company comes and they open Europe-wide, they usually fail, or they only partially succeed, because every country in Europe has a very different regulation. In renewables, licensing, although it's decently similar across countries, there's always exceptions. There's always differences. For example, in Italy, there's a strong push to implement renewables close to habitable zones, close to cities, towns, roadways, industrial areas. So there's this special license called the PAS, which basically allows to build projects very quickly in areas located 1.5 kilometers away from any inhabited zone. Now that doesn't exist in Spain. And that's very important in Italy, because if you're able to build a project in those areas, then you can get the regulation very fast. While normal regulation takes a very long time. So learning all these characteristics that made Italy interesting was very, very, very exciting and very, very beautiful. And 2 months ago, we launched there. We have launched with 6 portfolios. I think the total capacity is a bit over 0.5 gigawatt. So it's a good start, and we're getting good offers. The clients are happy, both sell side and buy side. So we're doing a good stride there. We're getting projects constantly. I'm going to Rimini next week, where I hope I can talk with a lot of our clients. So it's very exciting.
That's a great trade show. 2
months ago, we decided, hey, what we want to do is move to other technologies, because wind, solar, storage are the key. And I really do think that European wide, this is going to be the year of storage, and this is going to really be the year that standalone big battery projects, not the ones you have in your house, but really the very large ones that give support to the
utility scale,
the grid. Very much similar to nuclear power. This is the year that it's going to be implemented on a huge scale. But we also want to go into other e-fuels are becoming very interesting, especially biogas. There's a lot of biogas implemented in France and in Italy, but in Spain is a very, very, very new technology. And there's a lot of opportunities. We launched 2 weeks ago with our first operation plant, and it's going really well, because there's interest to invest in those technologies.
And just for the audience, can you recap on which markets are you currently in Europe?
So we're currently in Spain, and we are also operating in Italy. And those are the countries we have. We've been Spanish company, worked very, very Spanish based. But a couple of months ago, one of our clients said, hey, I want to bet on Italy because Italy is the market, at least Europeanly wide. The market for renewable energies right now is Italy. Of course, Germany and Spain still hold the crowns. They have a lot more implementation. They have a lot more projects. They have a lot more production. But as a new upcoming country, the pretty girl on the block is Italy right now in many of our eyes. And that's where we bet. And talking in the future, there's a lot of things to do. Of course, there's a point of innovating downstream. So we have digitalized what we would call the competitive process, the process of being able to find the person who's gonna buy your project. But we want to also digitalize steps further, the stage of analyzing the project and seeing, hey, what is really here. So being able to produce data room, being able to produce due digits. Also, other things we want to enter into new technologies. So right now there's a lot of work in hydrogen being done in the company. We hired an expert on hydrogen, and his objective is to see how our solution can be implemented into hydrogen projects, both operational but also in different development stages.
And currently speaking, what part of the life cycle of the asset do you guys cover? And do you start at the design phase, the operational phase, and do you go also beyond? Or
usually, and this is changed a bit, but all the projects we sell are from land lease and grid connection. So if it doesn't have a grid connection, we would just account it as a piece of land, and we don't sell land because there's platforms that sell that. We want renewable energy projects, and to have renewable energy projects, you need a place to produce the energy. So a plot of land, and somewhere, if you just produce an energy, but you're not sending it to the grid, to the distribution transportation lines, then you're there's no business. It's not possible business because you can't sell it to it. So we do utility scale projects. The small ones we do is 1 megawatt. That tends to be around 2 hectares of land for anyone who's not in the sector. That's basically what we do. Around 2,000 panels. Panels are usually 500 watts. And this is a million. Growing, so just do the maths. And then we go up from there up to, I think the largest one we had last year was 0.5 gigawatts in one single portfolio. So that's 500 megawatts.
Single project.
I think the largest one we have right now is a bit over 200. So that's especially in battery storage, because batteries use very little land to put a lot of capacity, because you don't need to produce, you're just storing it. Then you have much larger projects, especially in countries where the regulation allows for this, such as Italy.
Wow. And I mean, the other day I was actually reading the news about, what's the difference between Europe and the US. In the US, they have plenty of land and quite streamlined regulation, and in Europe we have the opposite, right? We have quite limited amount of land and then way more regulation.
We're the exception. So Spain there's a lot of land, and that's why Spain has become such a hotspot, because Spain is usually most countries in Europe are very densely populated. Belgium, Holland, Denmark in many areas. England is a great example, but Spain is a very big country and not very populated. So we have a lot of empty. We call it the empty Spain, where there's a very, very low dense population. There's certain provinces in Spain that have lower population per hectare than even the Sahara Desert. So it's very, very, very undensely populated, and we have a lot of places, and that's why Spain has been a very good place to implement it in renewables. But it depends a bit. Spain is a bit like Texas. Now it's the European Texas.
And most importantly, you guys also have the sun as well. It's not like here in Belgium, Texas. And the radiance is a little bit different indeed.
Yes. So we have a lot of sun. It's a blessing. It's very much a blessing to have the sun shining. It's a very shiny country. With that said, it's the problem with that has generated is that we depend so heavily in solar energy that it makes our business model for investors not as attractive. Spain has the lowest energy price in Europe, together with Portugal. It's not even close. It's very different. And in that way, what that generates is, of course, less incentive to invest, because although you have more hours where you can be making money, you're going to be making less money during those hours.
And when we are talking about making or actually generating the electricity, what is the tendency when it comes to storage? What percentage of your projects are either connected to storage or actually storage-based projects?
So I can give you, I'm just logging into the platform right now, and I can give you up-to-date figures with how much we're looking right now. And I can tell you a bit more about storage. I think this is going to, as I said previously, this is really going to be the year of storage, probably across Europe wide. In Poland, There's a lot of really good regulation that is happening in Europe, in Italy, of course, with the new regulated tariff for batteries, that it's going to be a really good bet. And then there's certain countries such as Spain, where you have overproduction of PV during the top solar hours, where batteries are not only ideal, but they're really much a necessity to really redistribute the energy production that's being generated. So right now, out of the 21 projects that we have right now on sale at this exact moment, this is not including all the ones we have in negotiation stage or that are in other stages of development, but really the ones that a buyer can go tomorrow and say, hey, I want to buy that project. We have 21 of those, and we currently have 8 that are battery that have batteries. 3 of them are hybrid projects, so they use both PV and storage projects, and what we would call behind the meter. So projects that only produce energy by the batteries that are only charged by the energy that is produced by their adjacent PV projects. And in addition, we have the other 6 that are what we would call standalone battery projects. So this is projects that the other 5, sorry. This is projects that don't generate their own electricity, and what these batteries do to charge is they drain the grid when they need to recharge, and then they start providing energy to the grid once the incentives are there to do so.
Wow. And when it comes to these type of stories, can you pinpoint one of your clients that kind of stands out? That's the most exciting project for you?
Oh, so I can tell you a couple of very interesting projects. Of course, now my baby is the biogas project, because that's new and that's an operational biogas project, which we have never done before, and it's very exciting. Honestly, when I tell people about biogas and biomethane and how it's produced, many times it doesn't sound very interesting, and people who are not in Spain tell me that sounds horrible. Don't tell me any more about that. But it's so exciting, because being able to operate a biogas plant and being able to produce methane from that. Just for anyone who's maybe doesn't know that much about biogas, biogas is a methane, the same methane natural gas that is produced to fuel any kind of gas production, and that is probably produced in Algeria or in Russia, where they have a lot of gas production. Through digestion of bacteria, you can produce the same methane. And the good thing about this is you can use all the waste to produce this methane. If you give bacteria a very specific diet with a good mix of both liquid and solid food, then you can produce the same methane, and you can commercialize and sell it. We call it biogas or biomethane. It might be a bit of a greenwashing and making it sound different, because from a chemical standpoint that is the same. But in many ways, it's different, because you can produce out of the waste that you produce in a local area. So we have one operational plant for that right now in Catalonia, so in northeastern Spain. And what is fascinating about this is the operation is the key. How you feed those bacteria, how you treat those bacteria, how you care about them, that makes the project successful or makes it not successful. And in many ways, we're used to PV or a wind project that developing and construction and building it properly is the key. But here, the building blocks, they assemble them in Belgium, if I'm not mistaken, and they just send it over and they plant it in the ground. But how you use it on a day-to-day basis, and where you get the food and how you mix it, that really makes a decent or a great production of biomethane, and that makes a different business, because it's really it's not a business of capital expenditure, but it's very much a business of OPEX, of operational expenditure, of how you operate.
I didn't actually know that. So it's basically, as opposed to solar, there you actually have the emphasis on the setup, right? And then you need to get that one right. And here it's more on the operation side, where it's much more labor intensive and much more operational to basically run the whole project.
Exactly. It's very much, it's a very interesting mix, but it's a very chemical project. It's a lot of engineering, or engineering friends always focus on the application of what is going to happen right now. And in many ways, that engineering I always laugh about, but it's really nothing more than applied physics. So it's really, you're trying to bring physics into the real realm and not make it theoretical. And here it's just building biology and chemistry in some ways also being like the theoretical theory behind biology to the real world, right? So it's a different business, it's a different total world, and here's it's a job of biologists and chemists, and not engineers and mathematicians and physicians. So it's very, very different, but it's very interesting, and I'm really excited with this project. And also it very interesting, it produces electricity, because now you have methane, you have the combustion engine, and with that you can create, with a cogeneration engine, you can create electricity as well.
Wow, that's super exciting. And since we are talking about books and studying, right?
Yes.
What book would you recommend, or what would you gift if you had only one chance to give this book to someone?
To anyone. So there's a lot of books that have inspired me across my life, and most of them are not business facing, they're not chemistry facing, but I think in many ways business and life, as you said, and listening, it's focused on being good people, and being someone that you want to that you want to be around. I always tell the people on my team, if I don't act well with you, it's because I have a problem with the problem, not with you personally. Because if I had a problem with you personally, you wouldn't be here. Because I hire or fire people because whether I get along or I don't get along with them, I think everything else can be taught. So what books do I like? I read a lot of philosophy. I'm a very big philosophy guy. Really like Plato. I've been reading a lot of Plato recently. I like Nietzsche, Kant, and a lot of books. But for me, or one of my favorite books of all time, and I think it's a very good tip for anyone who's going to have a kid. I think the biggest advice I can give them is read them this book, because I read this book when I was a kid. I read it 100 times after, and it's really become one of my road books or roadmaps in life. Is The Little Prince by Saint-Exupéry. I think that is a beautiful book talking about life, talking about what's important in life, talking about what's not important in life, and really talking about how to treat things, and not forgetting priorities, and understanding that there's a lot of noise in the world, and there's a lot of noise in business as well. There's a lot of noise in life. When you build a startup, and I think one of the things you said, hey, we had a meteoric rise, and how do you do it? We haven't wasted time with entrepreneurship parties, venture capitals, or anything that wasn't our focus. And it's very important to keep that focus and not get mixed in the noise. So I would really recommend anyone who hasn't read it. It's going to start talking about drawing elephants and a kid that appears in the middle of the Sahara and says they come from a different planet. But it's a wonderful book.
It's also quite applicable to all ages, right? If you read it when you're 10 years old, it sounds quite boring, or you don't quite grasp it. But if you read it at 15, it's different. If you read it at 20, if you read it at 50, it's always going to give you a different story, right?
No, I mean, all good books should do that. You should read it because you change. And the book, people think that, one of the things I said, I really like Plato and I really like Socrates, but Socrates, one of the things he said is he hated books, because he said, I read a book, I have a counter argument, I tell the book, hey, that's wrong because of this, and the book doesn't reply. It just replies exactly the same thing I said to them before, because it's written down and they can't respond, right? But in many ways, and I differ with Socrates in this, in many ways, the book does reply to you, because the book is not what you read. You don't read what is written, but you read what you get from it. And as you change in life, what you get from books is totally different. And the things you highlight and things that sound super interesting are 100% different. And it happens the same with movies. It happens the same when with the theater, when you go to see a play. The things you see are different every time, because the things that make you laugh or make you cry or you understand or that captivate your mind, it depends on what you have in your heart, and not what's really written or what's really talks about. Well, that's at least how I see it.
Indeed. I mean, it's kind of a two-way exchange of information, right? What the potential writer is sending your way, and on the other hand, what you are actually receiving at that moment, in your particular mindset at that moment, it really changes everything.
Exactly. You have to, like a conversation, there's a listener, and then there's someone who emits the message, and there's someone who receives the message, and this channel in which they emitted the email, or right now what we're doing. It depends what you think you're saying or what you think the book is saying. Every person hears it different. I love when we have a meeting, and I have 5 or 6 of my teammates in the room, and we have a meeting, we're talking with the client, and we go out there, and there's 5 different versions of what happened in the meeting. And someone says 39, and the other one says, no, they said 42. And one says, oh no, they were looking for early stage projects. And well, no, I'm sure I heard operational at some point.
Objective view of reality.
There's multiple realities even to something that happened on that second ago. So in many ways, when you change in life and you become a different person, and hopefully if you do things well, not in my case many times, but at least what I strive for is that you improve and you get better and you start learning things, then you should take things in differently.
And you mentioned mistakes. Would there be a particular failure that you would go back to in your past that taught you the most in terms of entrepreneurship, business, whatsoever?
So I will tell you a couple of my failures, and I'll be very glad to do so. But I'm a strong believer in Kaizen, which is this Japanese ancient philosophy, theoretical idea that it's not the big breakthrough mistake or the big breakthrough idea or the big breakthrough improvement, but it's about small improvements, small mistakes that you make every day that you make better, and the gradual mistakes that you improve eventually making the biggest difference. It's not I'm very skeptic of the Newtons, which I'm sure there's a couple, and Newton was a brilliant person and Edison was another brilliant person, and they had a one spark of idea and it changed everything. But usually it's more about small gradual improvements that someone makes, and the next one makes a bit better, and you improve throughout time, and then you make things better. So many times, many of my mistakes have taught me a little, but because I make so many mistakes, you aggregate them together, and you hopefully get better. So we have a couple. One of the biggest mistakes we done, and this is also in line with what we're talking, is doing things sooner and getting rid of fear. Many times I've been too conservative and I've been too afraid to making something, even if I knew it was right, because everything was going so well that I thought, hey, if we change this, then I don't know what's going to happen and I can't risk everything. And of course, as you get bigger, you have more to lose. And when you start, you have very little to lose. But in many ways, if I wish I would sooner, and I wish that I still improve in this, is willing to take the risk earlier and not waiting for things to be perfect, as we said before, not waiting for the mistakes. I think that probably we should have implemented biogas 4 months ago or 6 months ago, not right now. We probably should have been in Italy a year ago, which of course sounds super obvious right now, and everything's, and you can criticize yourself looking back, because it's so much easier doing that than looking forward when all you have is uncertainty. But in many ways is getting rid of this fear, getting rid of wanting to risk it, and being willing to change things. Because if you don't change, then someone is gonna either change and make it better, or at least copy you. You have to be a moving target. And if you're a moving target, every time I talk to my employees, hey, we're gonna build this, and they say, hey, but if we build it, they're gonna copy us in 2 months. I'm like, in 2 months, we're gonna be 3 steps ahead. So don't be afraid of, just do the next step and keep on moving. And by the time, and if you have that mentality of, hey, this is not the final product, but this is a reiteration, and there's always going to be constant iterations, then you're never going to be caught up, because every time they get to where you are, it's very Parmenidean. It's very the idea of if a turtle, do you know the story about the turtle and Achilles running a race?
Yeah.
So the turtle runs the race, and the turtle has a bit of a head start, and then Achilles tries to catch it, but by the time it's there, the turtle's moved a bit further, and by the time Achilles is at that point, the turtle is a bit further. So even though the turtle is so much lower than Achilles, how doesn't Achilles catch up ever with the turtle? Because every time Achilles reaches where the turtle's moved just a bit more, so it gets never get caught. Of course, in the real life that doesn't occur, but it's a very good idea of, hey, if you keep moving forward, just keep moving forward, and if you keep moving forward, then you're going to be all right.
So you either disrupt yourself or somebody else will do it for you.
Exactly.
And speaking of disruption and different roads taken, when it comes to nTeaser, what is your guys' motto or philosophy in terms of fundraising? Have you guys been bootstrapped so far? Are you guys looking to raise any funds ever, or are you going to keep this on an organic kind of runway? What is the strategy behind?
I thought you were going to answer our motto and our philosophy, and thank God you haven't asked about that, because that's a much harder question. You asked the easy question about financing, which I like a lot more. Financing. So we did raise a tiny investment round or small investment round from innovators. So what do I mean by innovators? We attended an incubator here in Spain called Seed Rocket. It's a very famous incubator because it's very much different from traditional incubators in which 2 or 3 successful entrepreneurs build this incubator. They have you in your offices for 6 months and they teach you everything they know, and then they launch into a world, which is fine. It might work for others. The problem we had is we had clients, we had projects, we had 100 times and we couldn't move to a different city or spend the time of having 20 hours of tutoring, because by the time we had the idea, we already had business. And so we didn't have time to go through those steps. So we extended to Rocket because it was built by successful tech entrepreneurs in Spain who had built successful tech companies and wanted to give back and wanted to have a week where they explain everything they learned. But it wasn't 2 or 3. It's around 120 of self-made entrepreneurs or tech, just the biggest success stories nationwide of the 120, 130 entrepreneurs. It's growing with new tech entrepreneurs that build cool things and they sell that, and they're super hyper successful. So I'm talking people who build unicorns or build close to unicorns. They spend a week of their time and give 1 or 2 master classes each about this is how you build a B2B sales team, this is how you build a marketing team, this is what I learned. And after a week, you pitch, each of them tell you they want to give you a bit of money, and then that's done. And they do it once a year in Barcelona, once a year in Madrid, and that's the thing. And I think that's one of the best things that's happened to the Spanish entrepreneurial ecosystem, which is kind of good compared to other countries, compared to, for example, Italy. There's a lot of Spanish startups, and even in a country that is very conservative in many ways. So this is something very cool that this 100 people built, founders of The Fork, of Idealista, of other big tech startups, and they spent an hour with you, which I'm very thankful. So we did that. We won that. We got many of them decided, hey, we want to give you money. And that's basically what we are. And right now we make money, we're profitable, so we're not really thinking about investing, but never say never, at some time, if I have something big ambition that I think can make it big, then I'll sit down with people that can give us the funds to make it. And if I think I can make it without that, then I'll keep doing it. It depends on the time. For now, I only have a lot of very small ideas where I don't need millions and millions, but that are making money, that are working. The day I have something I need 100 million, then I might need to ask for some money.
Yeah, indeed, you're the victim of your own success.
Well, not my own success, but I think everything has a time, and we're very much when you have to company, you do your plans, and this year is very much an execution year. So we're hiring people, we have money, you're making money every month, and it's really about growing and executing much more than planning. You always have to plan, you always have to new goals, but it's many times raising funding and money is a pain in the neck. It's so much work, and you do it because you believe in your idea, believe in your project, and you want to make it work. And many times you need money. So that's what they are. And there's many companies where one of the top directors, their full-time job is just getting money because they need it, because their project is not profitable. I have a really good friend. They built the first commercial, rocket company in Europe, which is called Space. They built the first commercial, and they're selling rockets to Europe. As a logistic company, they're taking things to space, very, very much like SpaceX is the European invest, and they are not profitable. They lose a lot of money because sending rockets to space is super expensive, and because sending rockets to space is so expensive, they need money all the time, and their job is to get money, and they have a whole team dedicated to raising capital. And I support that because I think those are the pioneers over time, and they're really putting really carrying humanity forward into very amazing things that we can do in space and logistics. But it's not my business, and my business right now is not very capital intensive. I only need people, and I make money with those people. So I'm growing, and the day I want to start sending rockets to space or some equivalent, then I'll go there and ask for the money to do so.
And never say never. You might do some space projects as well.
Exactly. No, I'm 100%. I would love. I have some ideas of how we could produce energy. Maybe put in some solar panels on the sun.
And if anything
there's a
is
lot of
possible,
radiation, even more than in space, surprisingly.
So the sky is the limit, literally.
Exactly. So we'll see, time to time. But for now, we're in a different phase. I think you have to know what stage you're in, and you need to know what game you're playing. And right now, we're playing a game where we don't need to waste time. Not waste, but right now we don't need to waste time getting money. What we need to waste time is keep growing more faithful clients, keep offering value, keep adding value, and And in many ways, if you do your things right, money will come. I'm not too worried about that. But there's a lot of people that want to invest in very young 25-year-old founders that are building things. So I'm not worried.
Yeah, but you're an old soul, so
Yeah.
you deserve the credit.
Yeah, no, I still have, there's a lot. Right now, I used to always be the youngest one in the room. And when I go to entrepreneurial or tech things, there's already one or two guys who are younger than me, and that starts to piss me off.
Well, age is going ahead, right? So
Exactly.
it's churning slowly. And when we are talking about the future, what are kind of the mid to long term plans when we are looking into 5, maybe 10 years into the future? Where do you see yourself, the company?
So in the long term, for me, it's the next 2 years max. That is like the really long, long term. I need this. I have one colleague that sits next to me, and I always tell him, hey, I need this, but I don't need this like in the short term. Like if you hand me in the medium term, that'll be fine. And he says, oh, when's the medium term? And I tell him this afternoon. Short term is in the next 20 minutes. So
You
for me,
sound like a great
long
boss.
term, it's 1 to 2 years. My objective is to be pan-European. That's our mentality from the get-to-go, our solution. No, it makes no sense that countries that have similar views than in Spain don't have the same implementation. So we're talking about especially the big countries in Europe. So Poland, Germany, France, the UK. Those are big countries we want to be in. Maybe even Romania, which is getting a lot of hype recently. Greece is getting a lot of hype. The Netherlands, is getting a lot of hype. So there's a couple of countries in Europe where we want to be, apart from Spain and Italy. And we would also love to try new things. So what is new things for us? We want to go into hydrogen, as we said, and that's very much on the short term. We're going to be implementing that. We want to start doing things with the e-mobility, which is going to be a big thing in Europe with the implementation of the electric car. Not only Tesla, but a lot of other companies that are building great electric cars that they're going to be in the market very soon. There's also a lot of things happening with hydropower. In Spain, hydropower has been here for a very long time because back in the days, very much the only energy source we had was waters. It's been a long time, but of course, there's a lot of M&As doing that. And hopefully in one near future, we can start doing maybe like industrial projects. So those are very lucrative and very good, because instead of selling the energy to the grid, you're selling to the person downstairs from the factory that you're on the project. So if those projects are clusters and they make enough volume for it to make sense, then we would love to be there. In regards to tech, we're going to keep getting better, implementing this data room, and keep innovating. And also and also in the short term, in the next year and a half, 2 years, is to start integrating not only those advisors that work closer with the transaction. So right now we have our financial, our technical, and our legal advisors, but also we want to work with those most linked to the development, construction, and maintenance of the plant. So those are engineering companies, those are EPC companies. So EPC companies, for everyone who doesn't know, are companies that build projects, and they have this word that aggregates them, which is engineering, procurement, and construction. But they're very much construction companies that build projects. And finally, those projects that do the asset management, or in many ways the operation and maintenance of plants, amongst other things, that help offer those services. So that's very much where we're seeing each other, where we're seeing us in the next year and 2 years maybe. But who knows where we'll be in 5 years, 10 years time. I don't know. Maybe we will be sending rockets.
Huh? You never say never, right?
Exactly. No. I love rockets. I said this for me. It's one of the coolest jobs you can have in the world. Having a company that does delivery, that does packet delivery, but from here to the orbit, outside the orbit of the Earth.
You can still apply to SpaceX.
No, sorry.
You can still apply to SpaceX.
I can still. They have a really good business, but it's not going to be a monopoly. The space is not going to be a monopoly. There's going to be a lot of companies that are going to do a lot of cool things there. But and hopefully they're super successful, and they're not. They when SpaceX sends more rockets, they're going to find the Pleiades space rockets also there, and they can say hi to each other.
Yeah, I mean, competition always is the best outcome of the competition is always for the customer, right? So the prices are coming down, the service is improving, etc. So
for now,
the customer wins.
The customers. I don't know if I'm ordering a lot of packages, Amazon packages to the space or to outer orbit, but they do a lot of good things for research, and it's very much a lot of the they send a lot of the I don't know what the name is, but
Satellite.
the satellites that actually end up doing a lot of the research about geology and forest conservation and a lot of different things that are super, super important and super interesting.
I mean, it's also going to be very beneficial in our industry in solar, right? So the more data you have, the more real-time data you have, the better you can estimate your project, the outputs and the potential. So that's definitely a big, big plus.
Exactly. It's at the end, data is exponentially exploding, and having access to data is becoming much more the key of many businesses. And the more data you have, the better decisions you can make. A lot of it, at the end, it's investment, and a lot of people are going to kill me, but it's very simple. It's how much risk I'm willing to take for this bet. And and many times the risk is based on lack of information. So if I knew this, then I probably wouldn't find it as risky, but because I don't know this certain variables, at the end, there's always going to be a risk with everything, because at the end, when you're doing prediction, you have the eternal problem that all the information you have is from now backwards, and everything you want to predict is from now forwards. So it's impossible, but the more you know about now and the more you know about the past, in many ways makes it easier, or hopefully makes it easier to predict the future. And then, of course, the more we have if used properly, of course, and if used excessively, because you can make a lot of mistakes when you have a lot of data, and you can become very saturated, which it happens to us all the time. We're a very data-driven company, so we have a lot of data analytics, and sometimes you become crazy and you get obsessed with this metric or this KPI, and it means absolutely nothing. And you realize 2 months after that, doubling this metric has done absolutely nothing for the business. So you also have to be a bit conscious of that, but not forget the big picture, but also be very, when I was working at Amazon, that was a big focus of, hey, being able to understand the big picture, but being able to dive deep and understanding the tiny things. So if you want to be a good leader, you have to understand everything in context, but also being willing to look at that tiny part, and really, if you have to get in the line of code and try to figure out yourself, then you have to be willing to do it. So.
Yeah, indeed, that both applies to people and also the machines, right? And speaking of machines, how are you guys utilizing AI in nTeaser?
So I wouldn't say utilizing. I think we're playing with AI in our company. So we integrate it to a lot of our processes. AI does a lot of the work that we do. I think right now we're selling 30 or 40,000 emails a week, and the AI replies to most of them, so we don't have to. But at the same time, we're playing. I think the potential is much broader than that, and it's much more much wider than that. So we are implementing certain things. But for me, one of the keys, not only implementing tools, because at the end AI is another tool that we have a lot of different other tools about automating tools and different, is about having order, having organized, and making good processes. And that's a lot of the biggest problems that we have had, and a lot of starters have, is, hey, how can you organize things when you're 5 or 2, and how eventually those doesn't work when there's 10 of you, and you change things. That works great until there's 50 of you, and then you go crazy. At the start, it was just 2 of us, so everything worked perfectly because communication was perfect. Easy. Even when there's just 1 of you, communication is the best, because every person you add, you become fractionally slower, but you have to make structures that work when you scale up and organize in a way that makes sense and standardized. And that's a big problem we have had, we're dealing with, we're getting better. And that's a big problem that we envision that is still going to be a challenge, but also in many ways, having a company and tracking back to our first conversation and how we started the talk is very much like having a baby, because you see it grow, and every stage has a beauty. And at the start of the biggest problem is the product, and then the clients, and then clients still being a problem. And now the team is a problem because you didn't have team before. So that never was a problem before. So it changes, it develops, the challenges that occur are different. And if you're willing, and you have to, fight every battle independently, because if you always throw the same answers to different problems, then you're not going to solve many. So,
since we are wrapping up, if you had a special wish or an ask to the audience, what would it be, both for yourself or on behalf of nTeaser? What are you guys looking for?
So more than what we're looking for is, what are we doing here, and what do we want, and what kind of world do we want renewables and renewable energy investment, which kind of fuels this whole energy transition to be. And for this, it has to be a more transparent, more professional, and less speculative market. So I think there's been a lot of people who have been making a lot of money in renewable energy because the market was very oblique and not very transparent, and there was a lot of misinformation or lack of information. And our objective and what we're asking people is, hey, let's make this a more professional, more professional sector to be. Let's keep moving this to be a more transparent, a more liquid, a less speculative market. And once you give them the transparency of saying, hey, this is a place where the professionals are trustworthy, where there's no tricks or a bunny under the hat, then they quickly come to invest in the market, and it helps us all grow and keep pushing this energy transition forward.
What would be the best way to reach you or nTeaser? What's the best way to contact you?
Wonderful. So funny enough, I don't manage my LinkedIn. Well, I do manage it part time, but I have another two people that manage my LinkedIn. But it tends to be the best way to reach me, because if I don't see it, then someone in my team will, and if it's something interesting, then they'll get back to me and tell me about it. So always LinkedIn is the best way if you want to collaborate, if you're interested in investing or in selling assets, or if just more if you're involved in the sector and want to see how we could possibly collaborate. Send me a message on LinkedIn. I'll be super happy to connect and see how we can work together.
Excellent. So I will link to that to the show notes as well.
Sounds wonderful.
And I guess our time has come to an end. So without further ado, Miguel, thank you very much for your time, for being here on Soliverse, and I hope to see you in person soon.
Thank you so much, Peter, and congratulations for this great podcast that is bringing to light so many different innovations and things that are happening in the solar space. So thank you so much for your time and for the work that you do for this industry.